In honor of Women's History this month, I am releasing the story I am calling The Phantom Rescue, the true life story of Coast Guard Aviation rescue swimmer Kelly Mogk-Larson. It's the early morning of January 3rd, 1989, and Air National Guard flight officers Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller and First Lieutenant Mark A. Baker from the 123rd Fighter Interceptor Squadron, the Red Hawks, began their pre-flight inspection of the Vietnam-era F-4 Charlie Phantom II fighter jet that they were assigned. They are one of two flights taking off for a routine military training mission, and the smell of jet fuel is in the cold, windy air as they fire up their F-4 Phantoms. It's a routine morning for the Air National Guard pilots from the Oregon National Guard. As part of their pre-flight briefing, they are informed that the air temperature is near freezing, 33 degrees Fahrenheit, or a half a degree Celsius, with high winds 18 to 20 miles per hour or 29 to 32 kilometers, with gusts up to 25 miles or 40 kilometers, and a cloud deck at 15,000 or 4,500 meters with a 100-foot or 10-meter ceiling for takeoff. As part of today's flight operation, their training mission is combat flight maneuvers, or in aviation terminology, dogfighting. The flight was proceeding as expected. While conducting basic flight maneuvers, all conditions were normal when suddenly the engine failed at 18,000 feet. The pilot, Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller, reported a catastrophic engine failure, specifically a compressor stall, followed by an unrecoverable fire and loss of control. In the F-4 Charlie, an engine fire at that altitude and airspeed can quickly compromise the hydraulic lines, rendering the aircraft a flying brick. The pilot, Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller, attempts to eject, but the ejection handle isn't working. He calls out to his WSO, his weapons officer, First Lieutenant Baker, who then pulls the ejection handle, initiating a dual sequence ejection, throwing them both violently into the air, away from their aircraft. The force of the ejection, throwing Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller out of the F-4 Phantom. As he exits the cockpit, it breaks his right arm and breaks his left leg, and he severely separates his shoulder. Then the automatic chute deploys and sends Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller with a jerk as the parachute deploys, and he descends through the 15,000-foot cloud layer, unable to see anything till he hits 100 feet, where the cloud layer breaks and he splashes into the frigid 50-degree ocean. The survival rate at this temperature is very low. Their wingman in the second F-4 confirms seeing two parachutes deploy, but loses sight of them as the two aviators enter the cloud layer at 15,000 feet. This is the true life story of Coast Guard aviation survivalman and rescue swimmer Kelly Mogk. Petty Officer Kelly Mogk later became known as Kelly Mogk-Larson. But this story, I'll refer to her by her name at the time, Kelly Mogk. Petty Officer Kelly Mogk graduated from Aviation Rescue Swimmer Program the same year I did, 1986. So even though she was a Coast Guard Aviation Rescue Swimmer, she graduated when the Coast Guard relied on the Navy's Aviation Rescue Swimmer Program in Pensacola, Florida. So this was back when it was the real deal. The instructors still put their hands on you. Training was life or death. We trained for the worst case scenarios. Some of the men with the biggest bravado quit just seeing what the training in the pool was going to be like. There were 2 female candidates in my class. They were held to the exact same brutal standards as the men were. I could argue they may have had it harder as they attracted the attention of the instructors. Just like myself and other candidates, you are constantly told you are not good enough. You'll never make it. And to some candidates, that's enough to get into their head and convince them to quit. But the thought of quitting was never a thought that crossed Mogk's mind. She knew she was going to make it. In a public interview with LaGuardia Cotight, she was quoted as saying, "What gave me my determination was everybody telling me I was going to fail." You are in grueling conditions where you could lose your life. The Navy attrition rate for Navy aviation rescue swimmers was and still is higher than the attrition rate for the Navy SEALs BUDS training. This was the same year we lost a swimmer candidate during training. This was the year they still did what was called sharks and daisies, an exercise in water fighting maneuvers that was later banned. So anybody who made it through this program back then was a true badass. This is the story of Petty Officer Kelly Mogk's most documented rescue. Petty Officer Kelly Mogk embodies the silent service code of the Navy and Coast Guard aviation rescue swimmer community. And that's why I want to spread her story and awareness about this community. At the Astoria, Oregon Coast Guard Air Station, the call comes in. They immediately deployed 2 alert status HH-65 Dolphin rescue helicopters. The crew for both search and rescue helicopters scramble, grabbing their gear and getting to the alert helicopters. An alert helo is a helicopter that has had a pre-flight inspection completed and is on the tarmac in one of 3 alert statuses: 5, 15, or 30-minute alert status. In 5-minute alert, the engines are running, the crew is on board, but the helicopter's rotor blades are not spinning. In 15-minute alert status, the helo is on the tarmac, ready to start, and the crew is standing at the ready or sitting in the ready room, or also known as the flight briefing room. 15-minute alert is the most likely status of the crews when this call comes in. Petty Officer Kelly Mogk grabs her SAR bag with her rubbers in it, her dry suit, her fins, her mask, her rescue harness, and her SAR-1 survival vest. As she runs to the helo and once aboard the helicopter, Petty Officer Mogk has every possible scenario running through her head as she gathers the information while she's also donning her gear. The rescue helo takes off, and at 115 knots, they begin the flight directly to the scene in the North Pacific Ocean, about 100 miles off the coast of Portland, Oregon. En route, rescue helicopter number 1 suffers a rescue hoist failure and is forced to return to base. This now makes the second helo with rescue swimmer Kelly Mogk aboard at the ready the primary rescue swimmer helicopter. Aboard the helicopter, the rescue swimmer only has minutes to prep, while she's also donning the dry suit for these severe temperatures. Finally, putting on her rescue fins and scooting to the cargo door entrance, the sound of the helicopter's turbine engines and rotor screaming in the swimmer's unprotected ears as she waits and is ready for deployment. Rushing through the swimmer's head is every possible scenario based on the information that has come in over the ICS, which is the radio's in-flight communication system, that could possibly be going on while they get to the scene. The first crewman and swimmer stationed at the cargo door spot the first survivor. It's obvious they are tangled and under their parachute. The helicopter enters a rescue hover pattern. Kelly and the first crewman see the first survivor as they look out the cargo door and approach the survivor, coming to a hover above him. The swimmer feels 3 firm taps on her shoulder, and the first crewman hollers, "Jump, jump, jump." The swimmer makes one final look out the cargo door and below her to confirm she is not jumping onto any debris. Then she jumps. The helo crew deployed the swimmer at 15 feet into 20-foot swells with waves capping at 2 to 3 feet. The frigid water sends the body into an automatic physiological response that you can't help, but your focus is on the rescue. You don't take your eyes off the survivor as you approach, and you're still assessing the situation. Petty Officer Mogk realizes the pilot is tangled in his parachute with his raft inflated. Her training kicks in immediately. This is straight out of rescue swimmer school training. A pilot trapped in his parachute at risk of being dragged under the water. She immediately goes into rescue procedures. She dives under the waves and below the survivor, and at 120 pounds, she holds this 200-pound man above her as she's under the water, holding her breath and detangling him from his parachute. This wasn't an easy task. She struggled against these parachute lines, ripping and cutting them away from the broken body of Lieutenant Mogk-Larson. When clearing a survivor from a collapsed parachute in the ocean, it is extremely dangerous for the survivor and the rescuer. The parachute is at risk of being filled with water and acting as a sea anchor, pulling the survivor under the water or through the current. So in this case, the rescue swimmer dives under the parachute and the survivor. She grabbed the survivor from underneath the water by his flight suit. With one arm, she grips his suit and his harness. Along the length of his spine, she works from head to toe, using her free arm and hand to sweep along the survivor's body. She works to free the lines and the parachute from the survivor's head, then from his arms, then legs. This requires coming up for air many times and holding your breath for over a minute each time, sometimes for a couple minutes and longer, as you keep sweeping the body, freeing it from the entangled parachute. For 60 minutes she did this, struggling against the battering of waves and frigid water temperatures, with hypothermia setting in. She must get him out of the water soon, but her hands are getting numb. She even takes her gloves off to help in detangling the parachute lines from the legs and body. She keeps working and keeps working. At one point, halfway through, I reached over and squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back. That was a good sign. I kept talking to him to let him know that someone was there, Petty Officer Mogk said. The HH-65 Dolphin battles 20-foot swells. The rotor wash creates a blinding mist of salt water. Below, ASM-3 Kelly Mogk is a tiny speck of orange against a charcoal gray ocean. After 60 minutes, and her feet being numb, her hands being numb, she finally gets the pilot cleared of the parachute and signals with her hand for the helicopter. As the helicopter approaches, it lowers down the rescue hoist. Petty Officer Mogk grabbed it and attached the pilot's harness to the hook on the rescue hoist. This is what it takes. This mindset of never giving up. You are saving a life, and that is your singular driving force. She has just secured Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller onto the rescue hoist. He is gray-faced, unconscious, and shaking violently. The first crewman, and with the help of the co-pilot, get the Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller into the helicopter. Skipper, he's blue. Core temp has to be in the low 80s. He's not going to make the transit if we don't move now. They don't have the time it would take to get the swimmer out of the water. If they don't move now, Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller will not make it. The pilot makes one of the toughest decisions a skipper can make as he considers life over limb. They signal to the swimmer that they must leave her in the water. They immediately begin life-saving procedures. Now imagine being alone in the ocean, frigid, cold hypothermia already setting in. Every minute counts, and the helicopter flies away, leaving you in the ocean with no land in sight. The most alone, scary feeling that you can encounter. And she's in this situation because she volunteers to save lives, and she has trust in her crew to come back and get her. She activates her emergency beacon and waits and waits. Every minute feels like an hour as you fight against the thoughts racing through your mind. The sharks in the water, the frigid cold. How long can you hold on? Are they coming back? Will they be able to find me when they do? I know they'll come back. I have faith they'll come back. The thoughts going through your head. I can't feel my hands anymore. My feet are numb. I don't even know if my fins are still attached to my feet. Then, in the distance, she starts to hear the faint sound closing in. And it is. It's the helicopter. A different helicopter made it back, and they could see her. They're picking up her radio frequency signal off the emergency beacon, and they've located her. They pull her out of the water. She's not in good shape. She's flown back to Astoria, where she received medical treatment. She had hypothermia setting in, but what she says is, I wish I could have done something more. I wish there could have been more I or anyone could have done. Lieutenant Markstaller was flown to the Columbia General Hospital, where he was then airlifted to a level 1 trauma center at Emmanuel Hospital in Portland, Oregon. Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller underwent rewarming therapy to bring his body temp back to normal. He had surgery to repair his severely separated shoulder. Despite the intensity of the crash and the struggle in the 50-degree Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius water, he made a successful recovery. He underwent 3 years of recovery before eventually returning to flying in the military and then as a pilot flying commercially. Every search and rescue asset that was available was called in to locate Lieutenant Baker. An HC-130 and an H-3 arrive on site with pararescue from the Air Force to help locate First Lieutenant Baker. The search was intense. Lieutenant Baker was found after 3 hours of searching nearly 3 miles from the original scene where Petty Officer Mogk rescued Officer Michael G. Markstaller. 2 pararescue were deployed and found First Lieutenant Mike Baker floating under his raft, tangled in his chute and unconscious. Air Force Rescue immediately began evacuation to Columbia General and began life-saving measures aboard the helicopter. Every effort was made by the hospital staff. The violent ejection and the severe hypothermia from being in the water for 3 hours before they could find him took his life, as Lieutenant Mike Baker died during surgery. Officer Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller credited the efforts by First Lieutenant Mark A. Baker to deploy the ejection seat with saving his life after unsuccessful attempts by Second Lieutenant Michael G. Markstaller to pull his ejection handle. Lieutenant Mike Baker was buried on January 6, 1989, at Skyline Memorial Gardens in Portland, Oregon, with full military honors, including a missing man formation flown by his fellow Redhawks in F-4 Phantoms. Petty Officer Mogk would be honored by the 142nd Wing, being taken on a flight in the F-4 Phantom. Petty Officer Mogk would also receive an Air Medal and be congratulated in person by President George H.W. Bush. She went on to serve for many years as a rescue swimmer, including a duty station at Air Station Sitka, Alaska, before eventually becoming commissioned in 1994. She then received her wings as an H-65 pilot, and serving out her service to the country as a search and rescue flight officer at duty stations such as Air Station Humboldt Bay, California, Air Station Port Angeles in Washington, and then serving as an instructor pilot at the Coast Guard Aviation Training Center in Mobile, Alabama, before retiring. She married and became Kelly Mogk-Larson. Just some of Officer Kelly Mogk-Larson's list of military awards include 5 Presidential Unit Citations, 4 Meritorious Unit Citations, 3 Good Conduct Medals, 3 Coast Guard Achievement Medals, 2 Coast Guard Commendation Medals, 2 Special Operations Service Awards, and an Air Medal for this rescue, along with her Meritorious Service Medal. In 2019, Larson was inducted into the Women in Aviation International Pioneer Hall of Fame. Officer Mogk-Larson embodies the silent service and the spirit of the rescue swimmer motto, so others may live. And because of this, we salute you. Written and produced by me, Melvin Hayden. Find me on all social media. I am at Air Rescue Vet. And remember to subscribe so you will be notified of my next true life story. Like and comment to help me get recognized by the almighty algorithm. I really appreciate you. Until the next time.